Hi there folks, today I wanted to show you an interesting tree here in our small forest. What we have here on the right is an old hawthorn. It doesn't seem that old by looking at the thickness of the main stem, but this hawthorn grew very slowly for many years because up to 2 years ago it was a thicker canopy up here, and we cleaned that up by trimming some of the dead trees around, mainly dead elms. And you can see that another elm grows here from a root. This is a root sucker, and it developed by leaning on the hawthorn. I think that's an interesting just like a point of interest in the forest. And this one is leaning way more, and this tip here was dead, so we had to cut it, and it's resprouted new growth, so we may have to shape that or remove that completely. But the hawthorn here is very vigorous, and up there in the upper branches, which maybe 5 meters up, there were hawthorns fruit up there, so I know that it's vigorous enough to fruit even in those suboptimal conditions. So earlier in the season I removed the tops of the three vertical growing suckers, such as this one, but this is just a tiny one, which I cultivated from previous years. You can see where I cut the previous branch, and it enabled a new bud to grow here, and it's similar in the other locations. So I deliberately selected those vertical branches to graft some of our seedless medlar and see how will they develop. 2 years ago I started experimenting with grafting medlar onto hawthorn plants, leading by the advice and experience from my neighbor, which has a large well-developed medlar grafted on hawthorn maybe 12 or 15 years ago. And you can see that this tiny hawthorn plant here is grafted in several locations. I deliberately chose the tip of the branch here just so the cut I made was a similar diameter a few years ago, but I worked with very thin scions, and I want to continue this experiment. So this is 2-year-old scionwood. Only one of the buds developed here, but it grew nicely and it branched out without much intervention, and it even had a single fruit set last year. And then I continued experimenting with those very thin scions. You can see here the graft union is perfect. This one as well, but not sure if that one survived, maybe yes. And that one as well, it made a small amount of growth here by single developed bud. This tiny hawthorn is here at the edge of the forest, and it's under a rather dense canopy of black locust and wild plums and elms. So I deliberately selected this location to see how would the scionwood develop, and all those new side shoots I can start grafting in the future as well. So now that I have already seen a successful graft, even fruiting one, of hawthorn onto medlar, even in the partial shade of the forest edge, I'm willing to continue my experiment here. And this year the experiment will be using this 2-year-old wood branched out at the top. I'll be making a couple of scions out of it, because I read in local forums that you can use 2 second-year growth of the medlar for grafting as well as first year. As a comparison or as a control, I also have a single year growth of the same plant of the same variety, seedless medlar. So I'll be grafting here and probably up here and see if the grafts take and which one performs better, the 1-year-old wood or the 2-year one. So I quickly did the 2 grafts. Of course they had to be cleft grafts because the rootstock is much thicker than the scion, and you can see here the clean split and the way I inserted the scion wood. This is the grafting wax I put on top. This is a terminal bud, so no wax, and this one has wax on it. And up here I selected this spot for the 2nd-year wood to be more preferable, more sunny, higher up. And you can see that those 2 buds are close to the point of the graft union, so they have a higher chance of developing. I put on the south side the branched out scion, and this is another one which is not branching, and I'm hoping for 1 or 2 buds to develop in that direction, the north, and this one to develop to the south. This is how the scions are placed. You can see that the barks are aligned and the cambium layers below are aligned. This rootstock split a bit further than I wanted, but I think that it will heal nicely, judging by my previous experience. Now all I have to do is wrap those with the tape and be done. And finally I wanted to show you this interesting specimen. This is an elder tree, and when we were clearing this area of the microforest, making this dry stack hedge, we thought that this plant was dead. All of the branches that came out of it were dry. Some have broken off and looked rotted. The bark seemed very dry and started to peel in places. And when I cut it here, all the interiors seemed dried, but I still selected to keep it standing so we can use it as a support for the hedge, along with some other living trees, such as this hawthorn here. And also because of their hollow interiors, they are oftentimes used as a shelter by mason bees and carpenter bees and other insects. But we were nicely surprised when in the next spring it sprouted lots of branches, even from those parts which I didn't think that are living anymore. I thought that it was dry, and it made easily 1 meter and longer, in that case, growth in just 1 summer, even though it's in partial shade by the hawthorn and the black locust here. So it's already starting to leaf out, as you can see, and I'm excited to see how this tree will develop and actually live a second life. So that was all for today, folks, and I'll see you tomorrow.